Hello and welcome to my channel. I am an ex-Muslim from Southeast Asia and this is my story. In the last video, I explained that there are predatory verses in the Quran hiding in between good or mundane verses. I called them predatory because 1, they are abnormal and defy logic and facts. And 2, they are also violent in nature. Example of a logic-defying verse is the verse from Surah Al-Mulk. It read, "And we have certainly beautified the nearest heaven with stars, and have made them what is thrown at the devils, and have prepared for them the punishment of the blaze." This verse is talking about meteor showers. It seems the author of the Quran did not know that meteor showers have their own clock. We are now able to predict them based on astronomical calculations. So, why do the devils choose to fly to the sky at those predestined times to steal some secrets from Allah? Can't they go at times when there is no meteor? Another strong fact-defying verse is from Surah Al-Dariyat. It read, "And of all things we created 2 mates or pair, perhaps you will remember." There are many animals in nature that reproduce asexually, such as zebra shark, turkey, Komodo dragon, among others. So how come Allah did not know about them? Sure enough, most of these asexual animals do not live in the desert or Arabia lands. This is a strong sign that the author of the Quran wrote the verses based on what he sees only. Other fact-defying verses include the one I mentioned in my previous video, the sky being described as something with a mass, boasting that Allah could hold it up without pillars, and calling it a roof or ceiling. There is a fourth facts and logic-defying verse that sealed the deal for me. The inheritance verse in Surah Al-Nisa. When I was a Quran-alone believer, I was amazed at these verses since I thought, oh wow, Allah has really detailed everything, down to the last decimal points. But I never actually investigate and scrutinize the maths myself. Let's take a quick look. The verse is quite long, so I will not quote them fully here. You can refer to An-Nisa, verse 11 to verse 12. Now imagine a scenario: a Muslim man died. He has 2 daughters, a wife, and his mom and dad are still alive. So based on verse 11 and 12, the relevant verses are, but if there are only daughters, 2 or more, for them is 2/3 of one's estate. This means 2/3 is given to both daughters equally. Each daughter gets 1/3. So that already equals to a total of 66.67% of your wealth. Next, the related verse said, "And for one's parents, to each one of them is 1/6 of his estate if he left children." Indeed, the man left 2 children, so each of the parents will get 1/6 of your wealth. That equals to a total of 33.33%. Then finally a portion to your wife, referring to verse, it said, "But if you leave a child, then for your wife is 1/8 of what you leave." So that is another 12.5%. Add them up gave a grand total of 113%. How are you going to split up your wealth if the total is already 113%? Of course, the apologists do have a rebuttal to this situation. There is a method called OWL, or doctrine of increase, and scholars used it whenever the fraction becomes more than 1. For our case, it was 7/6, so the OWL method simply, changed the 6 to 7, making it 7/7. This is typical in Islam. When faced with inconsistency, slap an Arab term to it and call it done. There are other excuses by the apologists. They resort to mental gymnasts to make the calculation correct. To me, as someone who prefers the scientific method and precision in words, I simply cannot accept this stupid mistake. Furthermore, isn't this Quran is supposedly a clear book? Why do apologists and scholars needed to resort to cheating in order to make it right? Doesn't seem like a book written by a god at all. Looks like Quran is written by an Arab man who sucks at math. The second reason why I call the verses predatory is because of violent and hate content. I believe most of you already know what they are. On top of my head, without looking at the Quran, I can recall a verse that calls non-Muslims as worst of creatures. There is also brutal punishments for those who fight Allah and His Messenger. Commanding Muslims to kill disbelievers, blasphemers. Cutting off hands and feet. Striking their necks. These are real verses in the Quran. Apologists may say they are meant for war, as in Surah Al-Ma'idah 33, it said, Indeed, the penalty for those who wage war against Allah and His Messenger and strive upon earth corruption is none but that they be killed or crucified, or that their hands and feet be cut off from opposite sides, or that they be exiled from the land. Sure, here it says wage war. But in Islamic education, refusing to accept Islam, blaspheming, for example drawing a Muhammad cartoon, also can be considered as waging war against Allah. I don't believe drawing a cartoon constitutes as a war act. I don't even think most Muslims themselves believe it is a war act. But scholars and scriptures are pointing towards that direction based on Islamic primary and secondary sources. And most Muslims had no choice but to admit in silence. And with such strong evidence from the Quran that the verses are written by man and not God, with heavy heart at first, I have abandoned and disbelieved in Quran forever. I don't think I would ever believe again, no matter what happens to me. I felt I was lied to, as my intellect was duped by the society around me, by this foul religion, Islam. Islam has departed from my body, and I have never felt such freedom. Huge burden has been lifted. I will talk more about post-Quran life soon. That's all for now. I will continue my story in the next video. Meanwhile, please subscribe, like, and share.